All right, here we go. So first video, I figured I'd start at the beginning for us. So, like I said, the point of these tutorials is really just to show the local hobby store guys kind of what I do, my painting process, all that sort of stuff. Um, so, the place where you start, once you've got your model all ready to go, assembled, ready to go. We're first going to prime the model. And so priming is really important. You don't want to just go ahead and stick, a bad and black paint on it right off the bat. The problem is the paint isn't going to stick, or at least it's not going to stick well. So primers, like here's some Stynel Res. I also have um, some Vallejo. You could also use a rattle can method. That's pretty simple as well. But today we're going to be using the airbrush. This is what I generally use um, to lay down all the base coats and primers, as well as do some fun other tricks that we'll get to in later videos. But today I just wanted to show us how to prime. So you're going to need some primer. I'll tell you why I have two different kinds here, two different colors here in a second. You're going to want some airbrush flow improver and some airbrush thinner. Both of these things are going to help the consistency of our paint. We won't need them as much when priming, but they're really going to come into effect later on as we get ready to thin more of our other paints. So I have two primers here, and really the reason is preference. So I'm going to mix these two. This gray is near about the same color as the gray of the plastic. And so I'm actually not going to I'm not going to paint with just gray. I'm actually going to add a bit of white. The white primer is, in my opinion, a pain to work with. It's very splattery. I don't enjoy that look or effect. So we're going to mix probably 2-to-1 in here to get the kind of mix we want there. So it's going to be kind of a real light gray. So I've got my airbrush here. This is a Badger Patriot 105. It is a great workhorse brush. It's what I would recommend any beginner airbrush you're getting because it can do a little bit of everything. It comes with a 0.5 needle, which is great basically for base coating and priming. But then it also can have all different sizes of needle that come with little new nozzles. So I also have a 0.2 needle for this, which has been really great because this brush does not have a ton of issues. I also have a Sotar, which is a lot more detailed brush from Badger, and it tends to give me a little more issues, be a little more finicky if you don't thin the paint right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and load up our paint in here. We're going to start with our flow improver. I'm just going to give a couple of drops of flow improver. I'm not actually going to use much, if any, thinner for this in particular. Generally, the thinner will make the paint dry a little faster, whereas flow improver actually keeps it nice and smooth for longer. So I'm going to give these a good shake. Pop them open and put some paint in our cup. So I'm going to give 5 drops of that to 10 drops of this. 2-to-1. There we go. Take an old crappy brush. I like to get it a little wet first. And then I'm just going to go in. You can see me really stirring that up in there. So now we've got a nice light gray. So, you might have been wondering why I'm wearing a glove. One, to hold the model and not get paint on my hands. Two, it's great to test on. And three, it makes doing this a lot easier. So this is what we call a backflow. So you're going to see, I'm going to pinch the needle, and then bubbles are going to come back into the cup. So basically I'm preventing the air from escaping out this direction and making it go up through the cup. So that's actually going to mix all that flow improver that was down in the nozzle area with the rest of the paint. It's going to give it a good mix. So, see on the back of my hand there? Okay, great. We got a good consistency. So now we're going to look at our model. So what I generally like to do is I like to go for the harder to reach areas first. So with this particular model, you can see that she's kind of got like a real open area up underneath her robes there, which is funny to say. So you're just going to go really light. And you're going to want to go thin layers, light, thin layers, multiple passes. It's okay if it builds up a little bit, especially with the Stynylrez paint. It's really good at self-leveling, so if you get a little too much on there, it'll be okay. You don't want it really like pooling in a lot of areas, but I find this paint to be a little more forgiving than other primers that I've worked with. So we're just going to go back over. Give it a nice good coat all over. And the thing with the priming is that I like to make sure that I get a really solid covering in this stage. And so I will go back through the model several times with really thin layers. This process is a tad different if you're using a rattle can. Maybe I'll do a video on that one day, because I know sometimes the rattle cans are easier and more widely available. So, but I have absolutely loved working with my airbrush. The cool thing about painting with the airbrush is that you work in such thin layers. Most of the time, you don't really have to worry about losing detail on the model. So we're going to let that dry for a second, kind of air dry it off here. So basically, there's two, and I'll do a specific video on an airbrush, but this is what we call a double action airbrush. So if you push down, it's going to shoot just air out. If you pull back, it's going to shoot paint. So you can watch, I'm just going to push down, straight down there, and then I'm going to release and pull back on it a little bit, and you can see that dot in the black there where the paint is coming out. So we're going to give this a good dry here. Going to get the underside of that robotic leg. It's so cool. These sisters models are awesome. This is a Canoness that I'm painting up for my buddy John in my local game store. He didn't really even have to convince me. I already wanted to paint these models. Okay. We're going to make sure that's pretty dry. Okay. Just going to gently lay that down right there. And now I've got her head. You kind of see that right there. we're going to be real careful not to clog any of the detail on the head here. We want to make sure we get paint up all into those areas. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not earlier, but primers actually have an adhesive in them as well as the paint. So that actually makes them stick to surfaces like plastic. They wouldn't normally take paint very well. Makes them stick to those a lot easier. So you don't actually have as hard a time with the later stages of painting because you already have a great base that is kind of bonded to the plastic in a lot of ways. I have found the Stynylrez is very, very sturdy. I think the Vallejo kind is not as it's not as sticky. It tends to rub off a little more, especially if you put your fingers on it. All of them will do that if you touch the model enough. The oils on your hands will just destroy the paints. So don't touch your models too much. Cool. So I think we have the head there done pretty well. Okay. So now we've got both of these all primed up and ready to go. I'm going to take a look at the body in the light here. Just to make sure I got everything good and coated. Looks like it all except for right up in there. I'm just going to give it short blasts. Generally, you want to try with primer so much it doesn't make a huge difference, but you want to try to be very controlled about when you pull that trigger back to let the paint flow. So you want to start your air, and then you want to pull back on the trigger. So it just slowly and gradually builds the paint up. Cool. Dry that off just a tad with some air. And voila, you have your primed model. Now you could put a lot of paint in there and prime a bunch of models at once. You could have done that. I just wanted to prime the Canoness for this video. And in the next video, we're actually going to put some color on her. We're going to be using some blacks and reds to do the robes, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk a little more about base coating with the airbrush. And we can talk about base coating with a normal brush as well. I'm sure I will have to go back and touch up some things. And I'll record all that for you as well. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you learned something, let me know in the comments. If you've got something that I need to learn, I would love to hear it. If you have questions, post those in the comments as well. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this channel. Like this video if you learned something from it, if it was helpful and useful to you. And happy hobbying.